welcome to this week's episode of the Uncovery Podcast. My name is Maddie, and I'm recovering from anorexia, and I talk about it on this podcast. Okay, how is everyone? What's everyone doing? I don't know. I feel like I haven't been recording as often, even though I have, but life just seems to be going faster and more things happen, and so it feels like more time passes between episodes. And I think part of that is just that my life has more things in it than it has for a very long time. And yeah, so there's lots of stuff going on. But today I want to talk about anger. And the reason that this has come up is the past week or so, at certain points, I've been feeling quite angry about my eating disorder. And the reason for this, it came up because, so, when you're dating and you are getting to know somebody and they're like, oh, what do you do? Oh, here's some things that I've done in my life. Oh, I've been to these places. And as an aside, I don't really believe that traveling is a whole personality. Does that make sense? My entire existence is my whole personality is just traveling. I've been to all these places, and I'm like, I love to see new places, and I've done some traveling, and I have really enjoyed it. But I also just I don't. It's not that I don't care. I care insofar as it matters to the person that loves it. Does that make sense? But what I really care about in a person, this is a complete tangent, is do your friends call you when they need help? How's your relationship with your mom? That's the kind of stuff. What's your greatest fear? That's the stuff that actually really, really matters to me when I'm getting to know somebody. But it does matter to me that people like traveling. That's totally fine. It's great. Anyway, okay. So traveling, where have you been? Blah, blah, blah. Very basic stuff. And you end up, exchanging photos and being like, oh, this is this time that I was in Thailand, or this is that time that I was in Germany. And so in doing this sort of unpacking, I'm looking back at photos of the places that I've been and the things that I've done, and I'm so mad because I'm scrolling through years and years of these photos, and every single thing I look at has this caveat and this rain cloud on it, because I look at it and I know what was going on behind the scenes. I know exactly what my eating disorder was doing at each and every moment. Every single moment, I knew exactly what I was doing. And it makes me so angry. And it's not even about my current body and how that compares to where I was before. I actually find it really cringy to look back at a lot of photos and things like that, because it looks more and more unwell to me the more well I actually get. So I look back at these and I'm like, oof, I wish I wasn't carrying that around then. It took so much away from every single experience that I had, and it just feels like this tainted nature of every memory, and that now I can't even share my past without anorexia having its ugly, duplicitous face in every frame. And I've not really felt this way before when looking back and being like, I wish I never had an eating disorder. I've actually never really thought that. Before it used to be, oh, I don't wish that I didn't have an eating disorder because I got to be skinny, gross. And now the way that I view it is, I don't wish that I never had an eating disorder because it's made me the person that I am now, who I'm growing to be quite a big fan of. And it's required me to develop in such a way that I think really benefits me for the rest of my life. So it was a shock to me to feel like I wish I never had this, because then all of these pictures wouldn't have that. that filter, like this deranged filter. So I hate it right now, and I'm angry about it because it's like life could have always been like this, and it wasn't. It could have been so much brighter, and I could have been much more alive, and the people that I couldn't connect with properly and the isolation that I constantly had to do to maintain some semblance of having my life together from an onlooker's perspective. Because at the same time, these photos they're like, oh, wow, look at these very exciting things. But it takes everything in you to even be able to show up enough to look like you are having a wonderful time. And it's so complicated and messed up because it's like I genuinely did have good times, right? Like it's not all bad. It's just there's this layer of dust on every single memory that's like, well, you had that eating disorder that was there all of the time, following you around the world. So I'm not really an angry person, and it catches me off guard when I feel this way. And it usually I'm a person that just, if I get really angry, I just cry instead of yelling. But I have no one to yell at except for myself in this particular regard. And maybe that's part of it too, is that it's not just anger, but it's anger stemming from grief of this life that I didn't have, or that I didn't get to live fully, or a life without caveats that for such a long period of time I just didn't have. And so now I feel like every single story about me has to have this caveat, like, oh, this is that time of the thing, but just I also had my eating disorder that whole time. So like I didn't look like well, or it wasn't as exciting as it looked, or I don't know. I'm not really sure where to put all of this. Even, doing really well, feeling really happy generally, it still kind of comes out of nowhere when I get a new emotion. And I'm like, I don't know where to put this. So that's a bit of a rambly thought process about where I'm at. But I do want to talk about, just briefly, anger in recovery in general and anger in eating disorders, because when you're in your eating disorder, anger shows up, I think, because you're just so on edge all of the time. And we've talked a little bit about this on other episodes, where you're just on a razor's edge, just being ready to be tipped off into some kind of outburst or distress, or things are frustrating, but it's because your body is like incapable of processing emotion when you are so starved. Your nervous system is just on high alert, constantly looking for a threat and reacting as if everything is a threat, because you're so physically, mentally, emotionally unprotected. And when you're in your eating disorder, you also have a much higher degree of just self-loathing and wishing for different and feeling trapped. And so it comes out as anger, I think, pretty commonly. It's very, very difficult to be that tense and that constrained in your existence, and to not have that kind of pent up frustration somehow unleash, or at least behind the scenes feeling it. So that's anger in your eating disorder, I think. Then when you kind of first go into recovery, anger, I think, takes a place where you are mad that you have to do this. You're angry that you have to recover. And that's not you. That's actually just your eating disorder screaming as it's dying. And it's, I wish I didn't have to do this. Why do other people get to keep their eating disorder and I have to recover and I have to do these hard things? And I'm so mad that I have to have this food and that I have to gain this weight, or whatever it may be. That's where you kind of see the like screaming tantrum, that kind of stuff that can happen in recovery for some people. It's not something that it's not really something that I ever have outwardly done. Most of my kind of anger, frustration, tension in recovery has been very internalized. Whether that's healthy or not, I'm not sure, but that's just kind of how it's looked for me. Because your emotions are basically unraveling. All of this numbness that you've had, that you've kind of carried along your eating disorder, because eating disorders make you extremely, extremely numb, it starts to seep out. And whatever's sort of in your line of fire, I think that's just where it's going to land, whether or not it's your therapist or your family and friends. Like, it depends on the person, obviously, but it can really, it can be a shock to your system and a shock to your support system, I think, to see you be that angry, that frustrated while in recovery. But it happens. Where I'm at now is anger in hindsight. So angry about what my eating disorder took from me. Angry that I didn't get my shit together sooner and recover. Anger about all of the things that I missed or that weren't the degree of awesome that they could have been, because it was just this overshadowing. So I'm so pissed off about that. And this anger that you can't do anything about it. You can't go back and change anything. I don't know. So that's where that's at. But I think the most important use or element when it comes to anger and your eating disorder is anger can actually be used as fuel. So if you need something to change, you need to change a behavior, one of the most effective emotions to instigate a change in behavior is going to be anger. It is such a fiery and powerful emotion. And so for me, the anger piece that followed a very despair-filled kind of fall on the floor type of rock bottom, the anger that kind of came right after that is what lit the fire of recovery for me this time when I did it for real. Is I was so angry and I was like, fuck this, fuck you, I'm done, I'm doing this, I am the one that can do this. That was driven and fueled by anger. So if you can get angry about the things that your eating disorder is holding you back from, use that as just gasoline and just use it to decide to move forward and decide to get out of this. If you need to externalize your eating disorder and get mad at it as an entity, that was not ever something that really resonated with me, because I was so entwined with my eating disorder that I couldn't even see it as a different entity. It's only been more recently that I can even kind of wrap my head around thinking about it that way. But whether it's the entity, whether it's just the part of you and that you consider the eating disorder, if you can get angry at that and what it's doing, it can be really powerful to drive behavior change. And also, I think it's important to note that we see anger, or at least I do, an ugly, negative emotion. And so I personally have a very, very difficult time leaning into anger. I think we get afraid that people don't like us if we're angry, or people can't handle our negative emotions. But it's okay to be angry. And whether it's with like a safe loved one or your therapist, my therapist is always quite pleased when I've managed to sort of like unleash negative emotion when we're talking, because, you know, I've been accused of being chirpy and positive when maybe I'm not necessarily feeling that way all the time. Leaning into negative emotion is actually really cathartic and really important. And it's a really big sign about what it is that's actually going on with us. So those are my thoughts on anger. I am still not exactly sure where to put it. I'm trying to just look at the place that I was, look at the place I am, and try to find the gratitude and the awe and the, wow, I actually did this coming from there. Isn't that great? Rather than, I'm angry that I was ever there in the first place, because what's that going to help? It is, it is what it is. It's already done. All right. That's all I have for today. I hope you have a great week. I will be bringing on some very interesting guests in the next couple of weeks, and we are going to be diving into the dating series because it just seems very appropriately timed. It's February, it's love month. I'm on this new dating journey, and so yeah, it's bringing up a lot of stuff, and I think it's a really interesting time to start talking about dating things when it comes to eating disorders. So stay tuned for that, all coming up. If you're on your phone right now and you are on the Apple Podcasts app, you're already there. You might as well go over to the episode page or the podcast page and leave a little rating and maybe a review. I would love you for it. And that's about it. I will see you on the next episode.